Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're ready to go ahead and get started with our meeting today. This is a meeting of the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board. Happy to host everyone today at Regis University. And before we get started, I want to recognize a couple of my colleagues who made all the logistics happen. So Adi Espinosa and Brennan McLaren. Thank you. And welcome, everybody. So we'll start with the call to order. Mr. Matthew Morgan.
Present.
Present. Great. Welcome. And Mr. Luis Benitez is excused today. Dr. Ishiwata, Dr. Eric Ishiwata. Not present. Dr. William Way. Here. Great. Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Way. Senator Perry Will.
Present.
Thank you, Senator Will. Representative Tisha Morrow. Here. Thank you, Representative. Representative Exum, Tony Earl Exum.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Commissioner Cimino, Richard Cimino.
Present.
Thanks. Welcome, Commissioner Cimino. Anna Stout. Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Catherine Redhorse.
Good afternoon, President.
Great, welcome. And Tim Wolf, Mr. Tim Wolf from the Tourism Office was planning to send a delegate. I don't know if the delegate is present. And Executive Director Rick Garcia.
Present.
Welcome, Director. And Dr. Tom Zeiler, who is sitting in for the Center of the American West, who may attend a little bit later today. I think that is, and Executive Director Tim Mock. And okay, thank you. And then Johnny, you're here? Okay, all right, thank you all. All right, let's go ahead then and let's approve the November agenda. So would somebody like to move to approve the agenda for today? Okay, thank you, Dr. Way and Tim. And could we have a motion to approve the August summary, or if there are any comments about that? Oh, the agenda, okay. Oh, we need a vote on the agenda. I'm sorry about that. So all in favor of approving the November agenda, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Passes. Thank you. And then do we have a motion to approve the August summary? Okay, thank you, Mayor. Second? Okay, thank you, Representative. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Aye. Okay, thank you. All right, so now I'll turn it over to our tribal liaison, Stacy Coleman, for some updates, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. For updates regarding the renaming proposals for USBGN case number 5028, Redskin Creek to Ute Creek, and USBGN case number 5153, Redskin Mountain to Mount Jerome, I believe. Since the last meeting, the CGNAB and Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs has continued to conduct regular outreach to various tribes, including the Ute, Mountain Ute, and Southern Ute Indian tribes regarding these renaming proposals. At this time, we have received formal official written feedback from Chairman Hart of the Ute, Mountain Ute, indicating the tribe's support for both of these renaming proposals. A formal written response from the Southern Ute Indian Tribe is pending, and the Southern Utes Cultural Preservation Director, Crystal Rizzo, has indicated that it will be forthcoming. During the September monthly CGNAB feedback call with tribes that the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs leads, Director Rizzo of the Southern Ute verbally indicated the tribe's support for both proposals and that the tribe's legal department would be providing an official written response to the CGNAB. Once that response is received, these two renaming proposals should be ready for further consideration from the CGNAB. Any questions there on that first update from anyone? Okay. Then moving on to the renaming proposal for USBGN case number 5557, Negro Draw to Robinson Draw. Since the last meeting, CGNAB staff has reached out to the original proponent and the U.S. Forest Service to update them on the additional research and findings completed by History Colorado, indicating that genealogical records may indicate a different spelling of the last name from Robinson to Roybison. The proponent has indicated her support for that change, but we are still waiting to receive a formal response on whether the proponent will also support an amendment to the application to be made by the USBGN. The U.S. Forest Service has indicated that it will need time to review the additional research and findings from History Colorado and complete its respective approval chain process on whether it supports the spelling change. The U.S. Forest Service also submitted additional research yesterday to me for the CGNAB's consideration, which will be added to the public information packet for this renaming proposal. And then also at the September monthly CCIA CGNAB feedback call with the tribes, Director Rizzo also, with the Southern Ute, also indicated that they would like additional time for the tribe to review this renaming proposal as well. A status update from Director Rizzo on the review is pending. Any questions on that update there from anyone? All right. And regarding the renaming proposal for USBGN case number 5765, Dead Mexican Gulch to Jose Velarde Gulch. We have received official written feedback from the Garfield County Commission indicating that they have selected the name of Lost Sheepherder Gulch for the renaming of Dead Mexican Gulch at the County Commission meeting held on August 14th. This letter will be added to the public information packet for this proposal as well, and follow-up outreach to the Garfield County Commission is being done to determine whether the county intends to submit an official name change proposal to the U.S. Board of Geographic Names on their suggestion of Lost Sheepherder Gulch. Just this morning, we also received an official response from the Glenwood Springs City Council stating that during the August 17th City Council meeting, the council recommended renaming Dead Mexican Gulch to Lost Sheepherder Gulch, also as recommended by the Garfield County Commission. And again, additionally, during the September monthly CCIA CGNAB feedback call with the tribes, Director Rizzo with the Southern Ute also requested additional time for the tribe to review this renaming proposal as well. And a status update from Director Rizzo on the tribe's review is pending. Any questions on that final update? Yes, Tim.
Thanks, Ms. Coleman. I do have a question, and maybe Ms. Runyon can help us out on, sorry, let me find my place here. On the proposal 5765, renaming Dead Mexican Gulch to Jose Velarde Gulch, we could consider it, I'm assuming, similar to what we did with Yansing in the board. If we were to go with Lost Sheepherders Gulch, we could submit that as a counter proposal similar to what we did with Yansing, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mark. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. This is great. Good to see you all. This is wonderful. Yes, absolutely. Yes, you all could vote to amend the proposal on site, and you could become the proponent of the new name. We're not too particular who submits the name to the USBGN, whether it be the county government or the CGNAB, but we would like something in writing on our proposal form. And then we would go back to the original proponent and ask his opinion on the amended name, and he would need to formally withdraw that proposal. If he does not, then it's an either or scenario. Both names will be on our docket. So thank you. Hope that helps.
Okay, yeah, that certainly helps. So in the Yansing Gulch example, we actually had the proponent who was willing to support the proposal, then the shift there. Ms. Coleman, have we communicated to the proponents yet of the Jose Belardi proposal in terms of the Garfield County Commissioner's preference?
No, we haven't, because I was waiting for the response from the Glenwood Springs City Council. So now we have, I think, the full information on that piece from local government on what they would suggest. Yes, so we can make sure to do that before the next meeting and hopefully have that, answer for the board to consider.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, anything else in terms of the updates, questions? All right, well, I'll hand this back to you.
Thanks, Ms. Coleman. And we welcome Commissioner Cimino, who has just arrived. So welcome, Commissioner. So I actually jumped ahead on the agenda. I skipped a board update item. And so I would like to call anyone to give a board update. And I have a question for Ms. Runyon, if there are no other updates. Oh, great. Commissioner, the microphone is all yours. We'll let you get settled here.
Thank you. This is Richard Cimino, Commissioner of Grand County, and I just want to update of the trip that we made to the National Board of Geographic Names. And it was really well done. It was my first time. It was Johnny's second time, I think, and next year is going to be in Missouri. And I anticipate Colorado wanting to attend again, hopefully through the generosity of DNR, TBD on the budget. But it was neat to meet other states in that gathering. It was just really informative. The presentations they had were outstanding. And just to meet colleagues in other states and how they do this is just really educational. So I really appreciate it. I think her name is Christine, the executive director of, Christine Johnson does a great job. She's a volunteer. She's on the Nevada Board of Geographic Names. And I really encourage you all to go next year if you're able. And then Colorado's going to host it in 2025. And so that's my update. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Commissioner, and that's a good segue into my question for Ms. Runyon. Ms. Runyon, I was wondering if you would be able to give an update on the two secretarial orders, 3404 and 3405, which I guess were shared at the conference.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I neglected to introduce myself properly. I apologize for those who don't know me. My name is Jenny Runyon. I'm on the research staff for the U.S. Board on Geographic Names, which is the federal equivalent to the CGNAB. And I work for the U.S. Geological Survey in Reston, Virginia. So thank you again. Nothing really new to report regarding Secretary's Order 3404. That is the effort to rename all 648 features nationwide that carried the SQ word. We're not permitted to say it in full, but I think you all know what I'm referring to. That effort was completed essentially about a year ago in that the US BGN voted to change all 648 SQ place names. The updates have been trickling through to databases and federal maps. The topographic maps of the USGS have been updated. And we have been getting a few follow-up counter proposals. That is from local communities, a couple of tribes, basically not agreeing with the replacement name that was chosen by the task force and submitted to the US BGN. But to date, nothing impacting Colorado. No one has, should we say, complained about any of the choices in Colorado. And I guess in a way that's kudos to the CGNAB, since you went out of your way to have a special meeting and a special dedicated process for those names. So it looks like it paid off in Colorado. So far, so good. As far as 3405, which is the second concurrent secretary's order, that's still very much working through the review process. A federal advisory committee was established. It's really outside the USBGN's purview. That unlike the task force for the 3404, 3405 are non-federal employees. Now they will be having their next in-person meeting in a couple of weeks. It's November 14th, 15th, and 16th. It's taking place in Hawaii, being hosted by a member of the Hawaii State Board. If anyone's interested in watching, that will be a good chance to get an update on exactly what they have in mind as far as addressing, quote, all other derogatory words. I can certainly share the link. I think if I don't know if I have access to the chat for Zoom calls, but if not, I'll send it to Johnny and she can maybe share it with the group. So again, it's being Hawaii, it's rather late in the day, at least for those of us on the East Coast, but nonetheless, it's a 3-day meeting to review Secretary's Order 3405, which eventually will make recommendations to the Secretary of the Interior on how to address, again, other derogatory words. So I don't know much more than that at this point. Stay tuned. So.
Great, thank you, Ms. Runyon. And you do have access to the chat, so please share that link.
I can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Ishiwata. Yes, welcome. So I know parking can be a little bit difficult on this campus, so apologize, welcome. So any other board updates? Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Tim Mock, Deputy Director for the Department of Natural Resources. Just want to report that the governor released his budget yesterday, November 1st. So that is out there in terms of the Department of Natural Resources. We're looking at about a $500 million budget. I think one of the big items or priorities that we're going to be focusing on this year is building on our biodiversity that's so critical to ecosystem health. And the conservation practices that are a key factor in combating climate change, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, enhancing wildlife habitat and corridors and such. That'll include 5 state land board staff positions. Actually, the state land board itself will be focused on building on land management practices, which will improve wildlife habitat and climate resiliency, and is similarly with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, will continue to build bandwidth for extending biodiversity through that organization. So we're very excited about this budget. I can send emails around later on for further updates here regards to that. And then also just want to say that Angela Bogue, our Assistant Director for Climate and Forest Health, is leaving the Executive Director's office. She has actually accepted the position as of Climate Resiliency Manager for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, so we're excited about that. So we'll be making some changes here in the leadership of the Executive Director's office. And then within the next day or so, we'll be posting for a policy advisor position that will assist with our responses to federal planning processes, NEPA and such. So if you know of anybody that might be interested, please send them my way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. Yes, Director Redhorse.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank everybody for being in person. It's really good to see everybody in person for this board meeting. I was super excited to meet people finally. As a reminder that November is Native American Heritage Month, and so just want to say that CCIA will be posting community events and other items on our Facebook, so please check out our Facebook. But then also a reminder that you don't have to celebrate Native American heritage and other aspects of other cultures just in the month, that we can celebrate it all month long, or all year long, excuse me. These events continue all year long and don't request only presenters in the month of November. We can learn and learn about each other's cultures throughout the year. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Redhorse, and thank you for that reminder. Absolutely, you're speaking my language as a historian. Great. Well, now we move on to agenda item number 7, which is the introduction of a new case, the USBGN case 5480, which proposes a name change to Kit Carson Mountain to Frustum Peak. And I'll give a little background here. The proposal is to change the name of Kit Carson Mountain a 14,165-foot multi-peak summit in the Rio Grande National Forest near Crestone in Saguache County to Frustum Peak. And the proponent states the following. And I should say, actually, frustum is a geometric term for a flat-topped cone or pyramid. And the proponent states that, quote, the current name, Kit Carson Mountain, glorifies a contested historic figure. He is seen as an almost mythical figure of the American frontier, but was also a murderer and perpetrator of genocide. As a U.S. Army officer, Carson led campaigns against the Apache and Navajo people. In his campaign against the Navajo people, Carson was ordered to shoot all males on sight and take all women and children captive. He was not to make any peace treaties with the Navajo until they were forced off their land and placed on a reservation. Carson, unable to capture the Navajo people, burned their homes, crops, and orchards and captured their livestock with the intention of starving them out of hiding. In the long walk to Bosque Redondo, Carson forced the 8,000 captured Navajo people to walk 400 miles from their homeland to be interned at a reservation at Fort Sumter, New Mexico. The Navajos were given few supplies and many died along the way from starvation and exposure. Soldiers under Carson's leadership shot and killed the stragglers. So that's the proposal that's on the table. Any comments at this time? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rick Garcia, Executive Director of the Department of Local Affairs. What do we know about the proposer of this name change? Is it an individual or is it an organization? Or are there more than one individual applicants suggesting a name change?
Sure, from what I know, it's an individual, Ryan Clement, and he was notified that we would be introducing the case today. So great question. And we do have some feedback from the U.S. Forest Service. So they, well, first of all, the Saguache Board of Commissioners did chime in and they declared that they do not want a position on this matter. So they have been consulted, and the U.S. Forest Service representative did send a memo in which they are supportive of the change. And in fact, they have consulted the Navajo Nation. And they quote the Navajo Nation, and I'm going to read their this quote from the Navajo Nation's response because I think it's really powerful. The Navajo Nation fully supports renaming Kit Carson Mountain. Namesakes are powerful, especially when they bestow honor and legitimacy to people like Kit Carson. He led a brutal campaign against the Navajo, resulting in deaths of countless Navajos, and later to the removal and incarceration of the Navajos at Fort Sumner. Memorializing his name in history books, statutes, and prominent places commemorate the forced removal and subjugation of the Navajo and other tribes. We cannot rewrite history, but we can strive to correct it by recognizing who and what we consider significant as Indigenous people. Supporting Kit Carson Mountain's name change compels us to understand our history and to use it to inform our present. Changing names at the federal level is a first step toward examining racist legacies and becoming more inclusive, optimistically enabling meaningful change elsewhere in the agency. So any comments or questions at this point?
Thank you. Maybe a question for Director Redhorse or Ms. Runyon. So it looks like the Forest Service, the Forest Supervisor did consultation with 13 tribes and pueblos regarding the proposed name change. What I don't see is whether the tribe supported the name. And so I know that the Forest Service Supervisor is supportive, but I wasn't sure what the outcome of that might have been, or if that has any indication.
I don't know if Jennifer Runyon wants to, I guess, If there are, I had the same question, Tim, because I noticed that they are in favor of a name change, but it didn't necessarily say that they're in favor of this particular proposed name.
Thank you, Tim and Madam Chair. Yeah, I confess I was not aware that the Forest Service had done consultation with tribes, so I need to reach back out to the regional office and the USBGN member and get a little bit more clarification on, when that was done, what exactly the communication said. And you're absolutely right. Did they simply support a name change, or do they actually support the name that's been proposed? So I apologize. I wasn't quite prepared with an answer, I guess. So I will certainly check and let you know. That's all right.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for that. Any other comment from board members? How would you like to proceed? No, the proponent's not here today.
This is, okay, Madam Chair, this is,
There's a micro, okay.
yeah, I think this was working. Richard Chimino. Yeah, I think we're all sort of hinting around whether, a geometric term is ideal. Maybe it is, maybe it's fine, but yeah, I really would, welcome some feedback if there is a different name that other proponents might have, and we ask the proposer if how committed to this particular term, or whether there's openness by the submitter to entertain other names as well. So it's a fine name. It's not particularly problematic at all. It's just kind of, I don't know, geometry kind of plain. It does feature does meet the shape of the mountain. So I welcome that feedback if others want to consider evaluating a different name. If we're going to rename a 14er, it might last a long time, and we'll do our best.
One of my questions was also about the name with the 2008 proposal that was to change it to Mount Crestone, stating that most locals in Crestone referred to the peak as Crestone Peak. And then the 2010 proposal that was submitted, and then in 2011, the BGN voted not to approve. I was wondering if we could get maybe minutes of those meetings, or if Jenny has that information, because I'd like to know the history behind that and the reason that those names were rejected, and whether or not those should be back on the table as part of this conversation instead of a geometric shape, if that's what the locals are already using.
Yes, thank you. Yes, this is William Way, and I wanted to agree with Rich. I think the name is not offensive, but it doesn't seem to resonate. And I propose that we make it a placeholder until we come up with a more appropriate name that might actually honor a worthy person or event.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Way. And Ms. Runyon, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I first want to clarify what I said earlier. I have to confess, this case has been around for a while. Like, it's been about 2.5 years since we last looked at the folder, and I did quickly check. And in fact, I do have a letter from the Forest Service, and it does discuss their outreach to tribes. I recall now that the issue was that there's a link in the letter to an internal Forest Service webpage where they actually presumably have the copies of the correspondence with the tribes. So if our Forest Service regional representative is on this call, I wanted to apologize to Jesse if I misspoke and was clearly not prepared. And so, yes, apparently we do have some copies, or can get copies of the correspondence with the tribes. But looking at the cover letter from the forest supervisor, it does simply say that the Navajo Nation supports a name change, but does not particularly or not specifically mention the name that's been proposed. So essentially echoing what you're saying too, is part one is, should the name be changed? And if yes, part two is this the best replacement? So clearly more work, I think, needs to be done in that regard to make sure this is a name that everybody would be on board with. And as far as the previous BGN activities on this name, it's been very complicated. There's some confusion as to whether the name refers to a single peak or a larger range. You get Kit Carson Mountain, and was one of the proposals we received back at the time was to apply the name Kit Carson Peak, or to change the name to Crestone Peak on top of Kit Carson Mountain, which might become Crestone Mountain. So the geography of that area is very convoluted, and it's not really clear, depending on the sources you look at. Are we talking about a range, a ridge, or a single point? So I guess if I might beg your indulgence, might be helpful. Perhaps I could meet offline between now and the next meeting, maybe with the chair and with Johnny and Stacy, and we can pull out some maps and make sure, and maybe with the proponent even, get on the same page as far as what exactly is being named and renamed here. And then along with that, obviously, yes, we can share minutes and material from those last 2 BGN discussions. Absolutely. Good idea.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Runyon. And you bring it to the surface an important point. So in the report, it says that what is now called Kit Carson Mountain is actually 3 peaks. So it is really convoluted and confusing. So apparently 2 of the peaks, they're named Challenger Point and Columbia Point, and there's some confusion as to the title of the 3rd peak, either Kit Carson Peak or Crestone Peak. So yeah, we can certainly iron that out. Yes, Dr. Way.
I probably should know the answer to this, but I don't. And the question is whether we can propose a name for them to consider. We can do that? Well, why don't we call it Navajo Peak? Just for your consideration.
Yes, we can certainly submit a proposal as a board. So,
yeah, I think as part of the research and conversation that Ms. Runyon mentioned, that maybe we ought to do a little bit of our own research also to see what other mountains, if there are any, named that. But I'd certainly put that in the hopper to consider.
okay, it sounds like there's strong support for doing some more research. Oh,
sorry.
Lauren, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We might have moved on from this, but I was just going to suggest if the board is looking at submitting a proposal, it would be appropriate to have a vote and make sure that there's the 2/3 majority in favor of that proposal.
My question was going to be just from a procedural standpoint, do we need a motion to move forward, or does the moving forward have to wait until we do some of this research? I guess, which is the chicken and the egg on this?
So if I may, so if the board wants to move forward and deciding to submit a certain proposal today, then we would need a vote. If the decision today is to do more research and become better informed, we don't need to do anything formal on that.
This is Catherine with CCIA, and I would just recommend that we do some more research because I think there is some geographic clarifications that we need to do. And then I would also like to reach out to the tribes and clarify if they're in support of the actual name in the proposal, or if they want to propose another name as well.
Thank you for that input. So how does the board feel then? Needs more research? Perhaps a small committee as Jenny, as you recommended? Okay, there's a question in the chat. Yes, we will after we get some more information.
They said when.
Oh,
Will it
when?
be reconsidered again?
Our next meeting is scheduled for January.
Will be in January.
Will be in January, yes, date to be determined. So it'll be reconsidered at that point. Okay, so let's go ahead and just go the path of gathering some more information, including from the tribes. So great, well, we'll discuss that further then in January. Okay, the next agenda item is agenda item number 8, which is process document revision. So page 22 through 31 of your packet. And I think I'll turn it over to Director Mock.
So I'll just cue this up for a second here and then might hand it off to Ms. Coleman to polish it off. But we are Now that we have Ms. Coleman on board, I think we actually saw from our last meeting, we were able to make progress through a lot, and we continue to do that. So again, really appreciate Ms. Coleman's work and the bandwidth that she brings to the board. I think in terms of having some various conversations, and especially going back to the report there that Ms. Coleman provided on those currently pending matters. I'm just trying to scroll back up here to the top. But some of those board members, if you recall, have actually we're back into like at least a year almost in some of the consideration in working through some of that feedback. So we thought maybe we ought to put in some guidelines in terms of timelines for responses. Now, we can always waive those, and I think we've been very generous when progress has been made and conversations are going on. But just so that everybody, I think, and for the general public can have some understanding about, the boundaries in which we are working to move matters along and continue to get through that backlog of proposals that we have on our agenda or that are pending in the hopper. So with that, Ms. Coleman, can I turn it over to you?
Absolutely, Deputy Director Mock. So for this proposal, it wouldn't change any sort of response timeline. There would be no deadline connected before the proposal was formally introduced by the board. It also would not have any impact on public comment. So, public comments would still be received up until any official board vote on the proposal. This is just in relation to once a proposal is formally introduced by the board and the CGNAB is wanting to do official outreach at that point, we would request a 60-day response timeline. And if an entity that we were doing official outreach to after that introduction requests additional time, we would certainly, be open to that. It's what we've been running into is just having difficulty in receiving timely responses to that outreach conducted. And we recognize that, public input that the CGNAB is specifically requesting is very important, especially from tribal governments and local governments. But we're also needing to timely move forward with the proposals that are pending before the board. Are there any questions at this time regarding the procedural proposal?
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. I just have a comment more than a question, is that I do agree that we need to have timeframes for the proposals to receive feedback, and that is appropriate. I just hope that the board also considers with tribal government, sometimes it does take longer. And so if we do need to make amendments to the 60 days, that we are open to that. And that is in honor of their respecting their sovereignties.
Thank you, Director Redhorse. And yes, the board would have, always have the opportunity to amend this proposal. Further feedback on the particular timeline was received from specifically tribal governments, but also, other entities too. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, Chair Gonzalez.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this proposal? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to accept this, this revision to our process with a caveat that we respect the sovereignty of tribal governments and waive the 60-day requirement when necessary? Okay, thank you, Representative, and thank you, everyone, for the second. Those in favor say aye. Okay, those opposed say no.
Aye.
All are in favor. Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item, which is public comment. Okay, so we are open for any comment from the public, both online and here in the room. Yes, Tim, right?
Hey everyone, I'm Tim from the Zooms. Nice to see you all in person. This is super cool. Yeah, just wanted to say thanks again for all the Mount Blue Sky support. Like it, just happened last month and everyone's really excited about it. So thanks for all your guys' hard work at it. And then, yeah, I guess for the Kit Carson one, definitely support renaming it. But yeah, Frustrum seems pretty abstract and instrumental. So if there's other options, that'd be great. Yeah, that's all I have. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's great to see you in person. Thank you for your commitment, guys. Any other comment from the public? Oh, hand raised. Jim Ramey via Zoom.
Hey, afternoon, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I had a double mute situation. Jim Ramey, Colorado State Director with the Wilderness Society. Like Tim, just wanted to echo the thanks and appreciation for the good work on Mount Blue Sky and say congratulations to the board for the thoughtful, diligent process there. I did want to note for everyone's awareness, the Mount Heavens Wilderness Area still is one of those other names that remains, and we have federal legislation that's been introduced and has already received a hearing in committee in the U.S. Senate to advance changing that to the Mount Sky Wilderness Area. So just wanted to share that for y'all's awareness. And then I also wanted to share, I happened to get to see Chairman Hart with the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe and Chairman Baker with the Southern Ute Tribe a week and a half ago, and they reminded me both of the desire to see the proposal for Gore Range renaming forward. And we are at the Wilderness Society formally supportive of the YouTube Range proposal. So I just wanted to raise that for y'all's awareness, since I got to chat with them a little bit about that last week. But really just appreciate all the good work you all are doing, and thanks very much.
Thank you for that comment, Jim. Any other comments? My colleagues. All right. Well, hearing none, I think we can move on then to the next agenda item, which is our next meeting. So probably the most difficult agenda item on the agenda. So we're looking at a January date, or if necessary, we can move it into February. So Johnny, I don't know how you would like to handle this, or Tim?
Actually, I had one consideration. I actually think January might be of interest, but I think we've got some state legislators here, and I know that they go into a session and it gets pretty hectic around that timeline. I was wondering, maybe Representative Morrow, if you know when the session kicks off.
It is January 9th.
January 9th.
And it's not that terribly busy in January. It's things, that goes along. So even an evening meeting or late afternoon meeting might work out.
So I'm wondering if we want to do in January, if we're able to do the first Thursday there, January 4th. I'll start the bidding at that. How about? Nope, we already got that shot down. Okay. Because you're going to be in Denver already. Okay. Representative Morrow, do you know your committee assignments yet, or the times? Are those scheduled?
No,
Nope.
that might be changing, but that's. I know they do quite a bit of meetings on Tuesdays.
Okay, so Thursday might work then. I'm looking at maybe Senator Will or Senator Exum. Any concerns with January 18th, that Thursday there?
Not for me, Tim. That should be fine.
I think that'll be okay too, for me. Are we going to be meeting in the in the evening? So going back to the evening time?
Possibly, and I think Dr. Way might have an issue here.
Okay.
Yes. um, Unfortunately, I still have my day job, and consequently, I have a seminar. I teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and my seminar is on Thursday afternoon, evening. Sorry, don't mean to throw a wrench in the process.
The other thing I would say is it being in January, I don't know that we would have as big or as an in-person. I mean, everybody's always welcome to come down to 1313. We could accommodate individuals at our conference room there. It's nothing like the hospitality at this at Regis here. Just so don't get used to this. But I think for the majority of us, given that and the travel in the winter, we'd probably be online, or a significant number of us. So,
Do Wednesdays work?
do Wednesdays work? Depends on the Wednesday. What Wednesdays don't work? Well, I think we're looking at the evening now with the legislative session kicked in, so we're looking at going back to 6 to 8 p.m., I would assume.
Yeah, the
So-
committees are usually done in January. We usually get done a little early once we get into February and March. Sometimes you may have a late committee meeting.
So let's start the bidding then at January 10th, Wednesday, January 10th, from 6 to 8. 4th through the 13th. And then you've got council on the 17th. Thoughts? Or real quick, let's check on the 24th for everybody. Seeing head nods. Okay. Was there any comments there in the chat, Johnny, that we needed to pay attention to on the dates? 6 to 8. Is that tough for you? Every Wednesday. Okay. Could we do it 5 to 7, Johnny? Okay, great.
All right, so January 24th from 5 to 7 p.m. on Zoom. Okay. All right, that brings us to our agenda item 11, which is executive session. So I'll turn it over to Lauren.
Thank you, Madam. I've got the mic here. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to those listening and those here. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Lauren Mercer. I'm the Assistant Attorney General assigned to be the board's lawyer. And we are going to go into executive session to do annual board training on the Colorado Open Records Act, Open Meetings Law, and conflicts of interest. So to get it all started, I have sort of a script I have to read. Then we'll need a vote in favor of going into executive session. And then once we're going into executive session, we will need to respectfully ask the members of the public and anyone here who's not a part of the board or the board staff to leave so that we can have a confidential attorney-client discussion. So with that very long preamble, pursuant to the Open Meetings Law, the board is entitled to enter into executive session at this regular meeting to receive legal advice pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute, Section 24-6-402-3A2. The topic of the executive session was identified on the agenda for this meeting, which is to receive training regarding the Colorado Open Meetings Law, Open Records Act, and conflicts of interest. With that, Chairwoman Gonzalez, I would invite you to encourage a motion to enter into executive session. Is there a motion to enter into executive session? Representative, second?
Second.
So I'm curious, why does Sure. So it's the sort of overview of what these statutes are and the high level overview of your obligations under them. That's not necessarily privileged and wouldn't need to be an executive session. The reason that we typically do it this way is to enable folks to ask questions with the confidence that those would be in a privileged setting, and also just it enables us to go a little bit more in depth on some topics in a way that would be privileged. If it's the board's pleasure, we could do a higher level version of the training in open session and then, do any follow-up questions in executive session if that's folks' preference.
I guess the reason I ask is from a transparency standpoint. I want to make sure that the public feels like they know. I want to make sure that from a transparency standpoint, the public knows what our training is, what we're being told our role is, what we're being told our responsibilities are regarding the OML and CORA and conflicts and everything. So I tend to lean towards keeping it open as much as possible and then having an opportunity for us to be able to ask questions of our attorney in executive session. But I also am always, I'm an elected who always takes the advice of my attorney. So if my attorney is telling me to go into executive session, I will. I just want to make sure that there's nothing that looks like we're hiding anything from the public by not sharing with the public exactly what we're learning about our roles.
I see no problem with doing it in open session and then reserving executive session for questions, if that's okay with the board.
Is that okay with the board? Do we have a motion? Undo? Withdraw. Thank you, Representative. You've withdrawn your motion. Do we have another motion to?
We don't actually need a motion. If we're not going into executive session, I can just get going on the training here.
Okay.
Then once I conclude the public portion, we can revisit whether or not executive session is needed.
Thank you.
Give me just one moment. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, just give me a moment to get this into presentation mode. Sorry, the little Zoom bar is right where I need to be clicking on things on my screen. I'm sorry, folks. Here, I'm gonna
No worries.
pull it up in a different version here.
Ms. Mercer, just a quick point of clarification then. If we've got a question, we should probably hold that until executive session.
I think so, Director Mock. And I would say if it's sort of, actually, if you have questions that are of sort of a general nature, wanting to clarify what I'm saying or what your obligations are, feel free to raise them. If they speak to something that's, a personal example or a situation that feels more sensitive to you, please hold them. And if I hear any questions that I think would be better to answer in executive session, I can just let folks know that. All right, so with that, we will launch into your training. Oops, oh my goodness. Sorry, I pivoted here. Okay, so the topics of discussion for today are the Colorado Open Records Act, which we call CORA, the Open Meetings Law, which I might refer to as the OML, and ethics and conflicts of interest. And this is just a brief overview of the board's legal obligations in terms of your service here on the board. There are a number of statutes that are generally applicable to every board that's a part of the state government in Colorado. That includes CORA, the Open Meetings Law, and the Colorado Ethics Code. And then this board specifically is also governed by the executive order that established the board, the bylaws which you have adopted, the conflicts of interest policy, and our process guidance. Starting with CORA, and I will say just at the outset here, I know there are probably some folks in this room who are very familiar with these subjects and are, could probably give the training yourselves, and perhaps others who are newer to this. So I'm going to do it at the level geared toward newer folks. So I ask your indulgence if any of this is repetitive for folks. So CORA is a statute that states it's the public policy of Colorado that all public records be open for inspection by any person at reasonable times. And what that means for our purposes is that any person, anywhere, has a right to access the records, documents, etc., created by this board without having to show why they want to see them or any sort of need. When disputes around CORA come up, it's worth noting that courts construe CORA liberally in favor of its purpose, which is public disclosure and transparency. So a public record is pretty much anything created as a result of your work here on the board. The definition is up there, but I'll go on to the next slide where I give examples. So in addition to things like reports, papers, emails that might be more obvious, it also includes chats that you send, Google Docs, spreadsheets, videos, voicemails, the notes that you're taking during these meetings. Those are all public records subject to CORA. And what's not a public record is actually pretty limited, really, to personal communications, right? If it's personal, it's not public. And at times folks tend to, do their public business and then personal, in our lives today, things sort of tend to get intermixed. But the best practice really is when you're, writing an email, sending a text, etc., about board business, I would recommend that you try not to mix in, personal with that, because it can get murky and could lead to some personal communications that you would rather not have public, being made public. And I'd just also note that it doesn't matter where the record is created or kept. It's on your personal cell phone, personal computer, is every bit as long as it's related to your business on the board, it's every bit as public as it would be if it was on a state-issued computer. So the question I have here is, when don't we need to provide a record in response to a CORA request? And the CORA statute includes, it could be up to 20 or more specific exceptions to the kinds of documents that aren't required to be made public for various public policy reasons that the legislature has decided. I'll touch on the two that are most likely to come up in our work, one of those being personal information, and the other privileged information. And personal, I'll address briefly, just to sort of calm anyone who's listening's potential concerns that if you reach out to, if a member of the public reaches out to you about board business and they provide their personal email or personal cell phone number, something like that, we always have the right to redact that information before making a record public to protect folks' privacy. So that's not something that's public. And then the other topic that I'll go a little more in depth on is privileged information. And there are a variety of privileges that apply under CORA. The two most common that we work with are deliberative process and attorney-client privilege. And deliberative process I'll spend a little more time on because for folks who don't work elsewhere in the state government, it might be newer to you. Because this is a privilege that's unique to government employees and government decision makers. And the purpose is to protect some documents from disclosure in order to protect the ability of government decision makers to have candid conversations, to have the sort of back and forth that results in good decisions. You know, there's a public policy decision that we don't want to chill or sort of squash those communications. And so because of that, the deliberative process privilege protects records that are both pre-decisional, so something that comes before a formal decision on a matter, and deliberative, meaning it reflects some give and take, back and forth discussion among folks. And so when records meet those qualifications, then they can be protected from disclosure. However, I do note that the deliberative process is not an absolute privilege. There is the opportunity for a party that's requesting a record, if it's denied on the basis of deliberative process, they can actually go to court and make a case that their need or the public's need to view this record is a greater need than that of the government to keep it privileged. That's very rare, but it is a possibility. Next is the attorney-client privilege, which folks are likely much more familiar with. And that keeps private communications between me or anyone else who might serve as the board's lawyer and you folks related to legal advice. And it goes both ways. It's not only advice that I give you, but information that you give me for the purpose of making sure that I can give you good advice. I will counsel, we always counsel that, you know, to be privileged under attorney-client privilege, it actually has to be related to legal advice. In the past, thankfully not with any of my clients, but there have been instances where folks will just copy their lawyer on an email in hopes of, you know, making it privileged by, you know, magic that way. That's not what the privilege covers. It really needs to be related to asking me for legal advice related to the board. I'll just briefly touch on the CORA timelines, which the big point I want to convey here is that the CORA statute establishes a very quick turnaround for DNR, for the board to produce records. Once we receive a request from a member of the public, the default is that we have 3 working days to respond and provide whatever documents are being sought. Which is obviously, it can be extremely quick. There is the ability under the statute to extend it 7 business days to a total of 10 if the request requires a large volume of records or there are sort of other good cause for needing to take longer time. There's recognition in the statute that, you know, the government has work to do other than just responding to a CORA request. So if, you know, cranking out a response in 3 days would interfere with folks' public service responsibilities, we have the ability to lengthen it to 10, which is quite common for larger requests. But even with 10 business days, sometimes that goes really, really quickly. So my main message to you all is if you receive anything, or an email or a call or something from the public that is a CORA request or feels to you like it might be a CORA request, please forward that to me and Johnny immediately so that we can determine, you know, is this a CORA request? How do we want to get our response going? Because it is, when you're acting on a quick deadline, the more time you have to answer that is better. And then my big capital reminder to you at the bottom of the slide is once we get a core request, do not delete anything that could possibly be responsive to that request. It's actually a crime to do so, and is not a situation we want to be in of even having to determine whether that has occurred. So once we get a core request, oops, I took out a slide here. So once we receive a request, basically the process is a member of the public, a journalist, someone sends a core request in to a member of the board, to Johnny, to a general email address. We learn about a request. And then as quickly as possible, you'll get, if it's related to board business, you'll get an email most likely from me saying, hey, we got this core request. We're processing it. Maintain your records. Don't delete anything. And what we do, and then we'll be asking you to provide any records you have that could be responsive to it. And we'll give you plenty more details on how that works when the time comes. But that's how it'll go. And we definitely appreciate quick responses on those. Even if that response is just, hey, I don't have anything. It's, yeah, helps us to keep the process moving and make sure that, you know, when we get a core request, the priority is always to make sure that we understand what the requester is asking for and that we get them what they're asking for. You know, it's our duty to make sure that we're being transparent. That's our goal. And by having sort of open communications with all of you helps that happen. And I think also, you know, if a request comes in and I'm asking you if you have records that are responsive to it, it's always better to err on the side of oversharing. If you're like, well, I don't know if this email is really what they're looking for, just send it to me and then we can review them and make a determination about what qualifies. Related to Cora, excuse me, Cora, but a little bit broader, is the subject of document retention. So like I said, if a Cora request comes in and you have responsive records, you have to hold on to those, do not delete. There's also, if we're in a situation, which we certainly hope not to be, but where there is litigation either pending or reasonably anticipated against the board related to a certain subject, you'd be hearing from me saying, hey, we need to retain all of our documents related to X. And please take those seriously. There are some pretty big repercussions if we don't. Also, if often if we're subject to an audit, there's a document retention requirement. So that's Cora. I hope I'm moving quickly enough, but not too quickly. And I'll dive into the open meetings law now. And the open meetings law is another Colorado statute aimed at ensuring that there's transparency in how our government functions. So the purposes are transparency and sort of as a part of that, preventing a board from sort of making decisions behind closed doors and then just rubber stamping them in a way that prevents the public from learning how those decisions were reached. So this law requires three real things. One is that public meetings, as the name implies, must be open to the public. That's why, you know, when we meet on Zoom, the public is always able to join. Even in this hybrid meeting, we have some members of the public in person and some online. The other is that we must provide full and timely notice of the public meeting, which is generally construed to be at least a day ahead of time, providing at least a high-level agenda, making sure that the public is informed about what we're going to discuss so that someone who's interested could look and see if that's a meeting that they want to attend. We're also required to keep minutes of meetings, which we do, and we even go beyond by, you know, having recordings of all of these meetings on Zoom. So definitely doing a great job complying with those requirements. Thank you, Johnny, for that. So the question then is, what is an open meeting? And under the statute, it has to be a meeting of 2 or more members of this board where, quote, public business is discussed or an official action is taken. So to break that down a little bit, the word meeting is defined really broadly. A meeting is not just a formal meeting like what we're having here today. It's a phone call with another board member, an email where you're having substantive discussions with another board member, text messages, all of those can be considered meetings. It has to include 2 or more members of the board. So any, if Dr. Wei and Director Mock want to get together to talk about a certain proposal, that needs to be a meeting that is open to the public and that we provide notice of, even if they wanted to do that by phone. Can't really do that because it's hard to invite the public to your phone calls. However, it does apply just to the board members, so not the board staff. I want to make sure everyone knows that you should feel very free to reach out to Johnny, Stacy, me, Chris, the folks who are not appointed board members. This doesn't apply. You can reach out to us on anything. And then the third requirement is that public business is discussed or official action is taken. And I'd encourage you to think of public business as really anything related to the board's business, to the reason that you're on this board. It doesn't apply to sort of social meeting, if any of you have relationships that predate this board and, see each other at a dinner party, you don't have to sit at opposite ends of the table. If you run into each other at the grocery store, you don't have to turn and walk the opposite way. But in those interactions, I would encourage you to not talk about board business, which is probably a good rule of thumb socially anyway. So anytime you have those 3, you've got a meeting, there's 2 or more of you, and you're talking about board business, that needs to be open to the public, have notice, and have meeting minutes. There are unlike Cora, there's only a small number of exceptions to the open meetings law. The most significant one is executive session, which is what we started discussing here today. There are specific purposes listed in the statute for which the board can go into executive session, which is basically a closed non-public session. The most common reason we do this is to receive legal advice. That's permitted by the statute. Also to consider any sort of confidential information. If it's hard to picture why, but if there was a proposal before the board that involved somebody's confidential business information, theoretically, we could go into executive session on that. It's not something I would imagine would happen. And so to make sure that even these private sessions are done with maximal transparency, they have to be noticed ahead of time. Well, if they are planned ahead of time, they have to be noticed, including the purpose or topic. There is the ability, if unexpectedly we're in the middle of a board meeting and an issue comes up that someone in this group wants legal advice on, we can have a discussion, a vote, and go into executive session on the fly. But typically they'll be pre-planned. And then you need 2/3 vote of the full board. So 10 of you need to vote in favor of going into executive session. And really importantly, in that executive session, you can't make any final decisions, adopt a policy, take any sort of formal action, because that would undermine the purposes of the open meetings law. You can have just open, free-ranging discussion about whatever topic the executive session is for, but we are not to sort of deliberate or come to any decisions during those sessions. Those need to be done in public. And executive sessions all have to be recorded electronically. And there's a provision in the statute that allows someone who thinks there was an improper executive session to take us to court, make a showing that it shouldn't have been done behind closed doors, And if that happens, then the electronic recording would be made public. So a few best practices to ensure that everyone is complying with the open meetings law. First is just don't discuss public business with other board members outside of these meetings. However, do, as I said, feel free to reach out to staff, to reach out to me for legal advice, etc. A big area where it's easy to make a misstep is please don't reply all on emails with multiple board members where something substantive is being discussed, because then that email suddenly becomes a public meeting. If there's an email like sent out saying, hey, we need to reschedule January's meeting because somebody has a conflict, what days work for folks? That is, in my view, something that is purely sort of logistical and not something that suddenly needs to be opened up to a public meeting. But anything I would say that's more substantive than that shouldn't be communicated about among board members by email. And if a member of the board who's not as familiar with this reaches out to you and wants to talk to you about something, I would say best practice just to say, hey, I'm pretty sure we're not supposed to have this conversation because of the open meetings law. Why don't you reach out to Johnny or to Stacy or to Lauren, and we can sort of make sure that that conversation is directed back into the proper channels. Our final topic here is ethics and conflicts of interest. So as members of this board, you are subject to the Colorado Ethics Code, which is a Colorado statute, the relevant provision of which says that government volunteers, such as yourselves, shall not perform an official act which may have a direct economic benefit on a business or other undertaking in which such member has a direct or substantial financial interest. So I'll unpack that a little bit. So you shall not take an official act. The recommendations that this board makes, the votes that you take, those are all official acts. So you should not do one of those that could have a direct benefit on one of your financial interests. And this slide lists examples of what under the statute is considered a financial interest. So it's more than just direct monetary gain. It's employment or something related to a loan, or if you're the director of a business that's going to, say, directly benefit from a naming proposal. Those are financial interests. And so because of that, there's a conflict of interest if any name change proposal that we are voting on here could have a direct economic benefit on a business or other financial undertaking in which you have a substantial and direct financial interest. So this one, it's, you'll probably know it when you see it. I would definitely hope. But if there's ever a question of, hey, I'm involved in this and we're voting on that, does this constitute a conflict of interest? I'm always here and really appreciate having those conversations. On top of, so I'd say those are your statutory responsibilities, and then even layered on top of that, this board has adopted a conflicts of interest policy that is even a little stricter than the statute. It's very similar, but there are ways in which it's different. And I'm gonna just flag those quickly. So the board's policy defines conflict of interest more broadly to be a situation where a board member's personal interest is incompatible with your public duty. So it's more than just a direct financial interest. It's something broader than that. And then there's the similar prohibition on taking an official action which would have direct economic benefit, but our policy specifically says on any business, including nonprofits, in which you have a direct or substantial financial interest. Arguably, nonprofits are included sort of under the statute, but given the fact that a lot of folks in this room are active on various boards, nonprofits, et cetera, that's officially called out in our policy. There's also the policy addresses the mere appearance of impropriety, which is defined to mean an official action that would lead a reasonable person to conclude that the board member has engaged in conduct that reflects adversely on the board member's honesty, impartiality, temperament, or fitness to serve the public trust. So even if something does not meet that sort of strict statutory definition of conflict of interest, if it would cause a reasonable person to think that something shady was going on with your vote, that's an appearance of impropriety that should be avoided. And so under the conflicts of interest policy, if you have an actual conflict of interest, you are required to recuse yourself. And then on the other hand, if you believe that your participation on a matter could give rise to just the appearance of impropriety, you may recuse yourself. So it's not mandatory that you recuse yourself just for the appearance of impropriety. This is not in the policy, this is just me, your lawyer, talking. If you think that there's a situation where there's an appearance of impropriety, I would greatly appreciate it if you'd raise it with me ahead of the meeting. And often I might advise you to explain on the record to your fellow board members, here is, my involvement with X. I don't think that it's actually an issue for me on this vote because of Y, and allow the board to understand that, given the emphasis on openness and transparency in this work. If you need to recuse yourself, you should do so before substantive discussions begin on a matter. So you shouldn't wait until right up when it's time to vote on something. You should recuse yourself before the discussions even get going. Or if there's a situation where you didn't think there was an issue and then the discussion takes an unexpected turn and all of a sudden you're feeling uncomfortable, you could recuse yourself at that point. After you recuse yourself, you'll need to leave the room, including leave the Zoom if that's where we are, and don't participate in any way. If that happens, one of us will ping you when it's safe for you to return to the meeting. Also under the policy, the self-recusal, I would say, is the best option here if it needs to happen. But there is the opportunity for any board member to make a motion to disqualify another board member based on a conflict of interest. It's not something that I've seen happen often, but it's an available avenue if there's something that one of you are concerned about. My key takeaway here is if either you feel that you might have a conflict of interest, or if you're concerned that another board member might, I'd really appreciate you consulting with me. We can absolutely handle these matters in open hearing, but often it's good for me to be able to do a little research, figure out, whether there's actually a conflict here, etc. So those conversations are always welcome, even if you're like, this seems a little silly, I'm probably being overly careful. I'd still love to hear from you. Under conflicts of interest, there is in Colorado a gift ban that prohibits public officers from receiving certain gifts under certain circumstances. As volunteer board members here, the gift ban doesn't actually apply to you. So you don't need to, go tell anyone to cross you off their Christmas lists. However, I do just think the best practice is if there's, is to avoid accepting risks that could give the rise to an appearance of impropriety. If a proponent of a name proposal wants to wine and dine you or give you a gift, it's probably going to be best to decline. But again, that's not a strict requirement. That is just my advice to you. And that finishes the presentation. I am happy to take questions now, or if folks have questions they'd like to discuss in executive session, we can go that route. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah. Hold on, let's get you the microphone.
As I was saying, while you were talking, a question popped into my mind that is not actually related to what we're doing today. But since you're here and you're an authority figure, authority on this subject, I thought, damn, excuse me, I really should ask you. In fact, I was going to ask you sometime before the meeting was over, but here I am with a microphone. So, I had to deal with the destruction of records. I always wanted to ask someone like yourself, what would have happened to Nixon if he had destroyed the tapes? I'm serious. I just wanted to know, would he have been punished, suffer some sort of, punishment, penalty?
I cannot claim to be an expert on those particular laws.
Yes.
But yeah, I think he still would have been in trouble.
Okay. I thought I'd ask. I'm sorry. I just, I may never get another chance.
Thanks for that curveball.
Thanks, Dr. Way.
Thanks. Well, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to follow up with me by email, ask me offline. My cell phone number is now on the screen shared with the public, which I didn't think through, but I did intend to share that with you folks. If you ever need to get in touch with me quickly, that's a good way to do it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General Mercer. That brings us to, actually, Director Garcia, you had an announcement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to make sure I made it today to see everybody in person because I've been seeing you on virtual for the last 3 years or so. But I wanted to remind everyone or make you aware, if you're not aware, that today will be my last naming commission meeting, advisory board meeting. I announced my retirement from state service in September. So I will be leaving my position as DOLA Executive Director at the end of December. But I wanted to give kudos to the current board, the past board, particularly some members that really in the early stages, in my opinion, of the reconstitution of the Geographic Naming Board really played a pivotal role in striking the direction that I think this board went. And those are folks like former Representative Adrian Benavides, our former state historian, Dr. Limerick, who I think played significant roles. And I know there's some newer members I haven't had a chance to really work with in this regard, but as the DOLA Executive Director, I'm on this naming commission by virtue of my position title. So there will be another DOLA Executive Director named soon, and I'm sure that individual will come on and do a fine job. But the work primarily was broad and very diverse, very interesting. And I think of all the boards and commissions that I'm on, either by statute or by executive order, this one probably has been the most meaningful, and particularly with the work that was done in the name change of Mount Evans to Mount Blue Sky. I really want to compliment the board for that work. It was really important. And I also want to give kudos to the Clear Creek County Commissioners. In fact, Tim Mock probably was involved in those early discussions because that proposal had been on the docket for many, many, many years before it actually got to this particular group. And I know Tim, as a former commissioner, probably had a role in that, but currently the existing county commissioners, I think, played a pretty important, strong leadership role, and I was very proud about that. So, Madam Chair, kudos to you in your new leadership role, and my best to all the board members going forward. This is important work, and I'm glad I had a piece of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Executive Director Garcia, and congratulations on a fine career. I've always had great admiration for you. So, and with that, one more. Director Mock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, I just also want to thank you, Director Garcia, and you're right, he has had an exceptional public career, and I just can't imagine the term retirement applying to you. I still expect that we will see you pop up somewhere, and if you ever need a seat around the table, you're always welcome back. We really appreciate all that you've done for local government, for the state of Colorado, and for this board. So thank you very much, and best wishes to you. Also, Madam Chair, just want to thank you and Regis and your team here for the accommodations. This is very lovely, and how great it is. Actually, it's quite a treat to be able to see everybody here in person. So thank you for taking the time to join us. So thank you.
You're very welcome. We were thrilled to host. So with that, do I have an motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Executive Director Garcia. Second? Thank you, Representative. Any discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no.
Aye.
Thank you. We're adjourned.